Your lips, and all at once the sparks go flying. Those devil lips can know so well the art of lying. And though I see the danger, still the flame grows higher. I know I must surrender to your kiss of fire.
Ladies and gentlemen, our program will begin in 5 minutes. We would like to take this opportunity to thank you for attending the Come From Away panel, and we welcome you to Rose State College, where we are celebrating our golden anniversary in 2020, 50 years of providing quality education to hundreds of thousands of students. If you'll find your seat, our program will begin shortly, and thank you for being a part as we rise with Rose.
Welcome to the Rock.
This is Captain Bass. There's been a crisis in the U.S. All of the airspace is closed. We're going to be landing in Gander, Newfoundland. Beverley Bass, 9/11/2001.
You just heard the words that were spoken by one of our panelists on the morning of 9/11/2001. She had just learned that terrorists had crashed planes into the field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, into the site of the Pentagon, as well as the Twin Towers in New York City. She was a pilot that morning. She was aboard her American Airlines flight en route from Paris to Dallas with 156 people on board her airplane that day. She was told to immediately vacate the U.S. airspace. Well, she did land safely. She landed in Gander, Newfoundland, and I guarantee you've probably heard the story of what happened in the days after 9/11 in Gander, when a town of 9,000 people soon became a town of 16,000, literally overnight. In fact, that's the premise of the musical Come From Away, which is coming to the Oklahoma City Civic Center in February. But before those presenters and performers get on the stage for you to see that performance, you're going to get to hear from the pilot who made that recording right here on our stage, along with 3 other incredibly inspiring women who have changed their worlds because of their passion. In fact, that's what we're here to do today, is talk about how letting your passion can change your career and your community and let it take you far. If you would, please welcome our first panelist to the area, Miss Beverley Bass. She was the first American Airlines female pilot that was hired by that airline, and of course she's the inspiration behind the Come From Away musical, the main character who is in that show, which you'll be able to see. Next up, Dr. Jeanie Webb. We all know her as the president of Rose State College, our president. She is a fierce advocate of higher education for everyone, so thank you for being with us, Dr. Webb. Next, would you please welcome Ms. Amy Downs? Amy is the CEO of Allegiance Credit Union, as well as a survivor of the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing. And Miss Lindy Ritz. Miss Lindy was the first ever director of the Mike Monroney Aeronautical Center. If you've flown out of Will Rogers World Airport, you've seen the signs that say FAA. You know it's right there. Now imagine being in charge of that giant complex. She was the first female. So thank you, ladies, for being with us. Certainly appreciate your time. And I know I would be remiss if I didn't start by just asking what I know the audience is interested in, I want to know about, is telling me a little bit about what got you here, the key elements that happened or the life-changing events that happened that got you to where we are. And I'll start with Beverley. I mean, I certainly can say 9/11, but I don't know that that would be your answer.
Well, certainly 9/11 and the events that have occurred afterwards with the musical Come From Away have no doubt been life-changing for me. But really my career at American was pretty astounding. I was the 3rd female pilot to be hired by American in 1976, and 10 years later I became their first female captain. And I didn't think it was a big deal. I thought I was just going to go through training like all the other guys and just kind of be unnoticed. That was hardly the case. They followed me every step of the way. Every city I landed in, there were news people, cameras, everything. And so it's a pretty monumental time in my career. And then only 1 month later, after becoming the first female captain, I had the first all-female crew with American. And amazingly enough, it was a 2-day trip, and we actually laid over here in Oklahoma City.
So all roads do lead to Oklahoma City.
They do.
Absolutely. They do. Dr. Webb, I'll ask you the same question.
You know, I'm not sure about following Beverley. I mean, that is a real question for me. We all have different things that impact us in life, and I think mine probably starts more with childhood and growing up in a very low income family, not really believing I would have an opportunity to do anything beyond just graduate and get a job wherever. But I think for me, the event that changed my life, there's a couple of them, but one for sure is that my dad, when I was 16, had a stroke, and he was a barber, of all things. So guess what? You can't cut hair anymore. So my mom was trying to support our family, and I remember thinking, and my mom always saying, I don't want you to have this life. I want you to have so much more. So I went to college, and like many of you, you just don't know if you can do it. It's that one professor, and some of the professors are here today. It's that one person that touched your life, that believed in you, that gave you that self-confidence. And certainly there have been challenges throughout. Now, and the last thing I will say is I was probably a little bit of an overachiever in that, I got my degree in 3 years and my master's in a year and my doctorate in 2 because I had to get out to make money. But that's probably really the changing for me, first generation student. And for higher ed, it's certainly important when I'm able to relate that I started at a community college. And that's my belief system.
Absolutely. Miss Amy? Well, I was 28 years old when the bombing happened, and I fell 3 floors and was pretty much buried alive under about 10 feet of rubble. And the scariest part, though, is they found where I was located, and I thought they were getting ready to get me out because I could hear them. They were working on moving rubble around. But then they started yelling, there's another bomb, we have to go. And they left me. So I was, found out later I was still in my chair upside down, but buried under about 10 feet of rubble. And knowing I'm getting ready to die because a bomb's getting ready to go off. And so I had what people talk about when they say they have life flashing before their eyes. And at that time, I was 28 years old. I had flunked out of college because I couldn't pass a math class. The remedial math class, not even the real one. And I was 355 pounds, and I was just leading a very complacent life. And all of a sudden in those moments, everything was very clear because I was getting ready to die, and I'm thinking I've never even lived. Like I've never lived. And so fast forward to 6.5 hours later when they got me out, and I took the first breath of fresh air, I remember looking up at the sky and promising God, I will never live my life the same. And so for the past almost 25 years, I have felt like I'm living on borrowed time. And so it changed everything. And I'm all about personal growth and just wanting to find out how I'm supposed to serve, and what that means that I need to be doing in my life to serve others. So that had a profound impact on my life and really led to a lot of the decisions that I made going forward.
Lindy?
If I had ever thought I would go into aviation as a child, it never would have happened. I should have read the tea leaves. I used to fly with my dad. My name is Lindy, so there's something to that. But getting out of college, this was not the plan. I ended up going to work for the government. Again, that was not the plan. We moved, came back to Oklahoma City, and by chance, I applied with FAA through a sorority sister's dad's contact. And they said, we'll go to D.C. and we'll get permission to hire you, which I thought would never happen, and they did. And that set a course of an unbelievable career, an exciting occupation with aviation. And I'm still doing that today, but I remember when I first got in, and I think we all suffer a little bit from, I don't know if I can do this, very male-dominated organization. And the source of support that I got the most was from men. And I've never forgotten that, because they would say, you can do it. You've got what it takes. I don't think I believed it, but they were the ones that kind of swift kick in the pants to get out and say, you can do it. And I moved into various different occupations, and I never thought at any time I would have really the wonderful opportunity to lead the Aeronautical Center. And I feel very blessed.
I think if we're honest with ourselves, men and women in the audience will say that every one of us has that moment where we say, I don't know if I can do this. I just don't know if I can do this. But that leads into the next question of, we've all faced crises. Small, medium, you may say they're not a crisis, you may say they are a crisis. But how have you provided leadership around that, regardless of what position you were in, whether it was a leadership, per se, role? What have you done to help guide people through crises, because they're going to happen whether you like it or not, and it doesn't matter which position you sit in? Amy?
Well, after the bombing, I worked for the credit union, and 18 of our 33 employees were killed. Not only that, we lost our business model because we were in a building and we were supposed to serve the people in the building, and the building was gone, and most of our employees were gone. And suddenly, we were faced with, well, what are we going to do? And it would have been very easy at that point in time to just merge with a bigger financial institution. And some people suggested that's what we should do. But it was very important for those of us that survived to keep going, to honor the people that we lost. And so we had to manage through an incredible crisis time. And when I look back now, we didn't have, there was no handbook telling us, what to do. But I look back now, and what I see was that it was a lot of communication, like constant communication. We had to get really clear about where we wanted to go and then communicate it, and the caring that had to happen, because you couldn't just bark orders. You couldn't just say, this is what we want and let's go do it. You had to care deeply for everybody involved and constantly communicate the clear picture of this is what we want, this is where we're going, and then constantly keep redefining the steps to get to that. And so we just did this over and over and over again until, well, we still do it today, that's just what you do. You just constantly have to get clear on where am I going? What are the steps to get there, and take the next step.
Dr. Webb?
Well, I think I can tell you I have not been through the crisis that they have been through. I do think we've had many challenges. We use words challenges because that's a word, as anybody that knows me very well knows, everything's a challenge. We don't have a crisis. And there's many different kinds of challenges in a college. There's things I know that necessarily you don't share because you don't want to create fear. I think it's extremely important to remain calm. There are many nights that I may be called at 2 or 4 in the morning from our chief of police, and we try to figure out the best way to deal with the situation to protect people. And obviously, if you're in higher ed or you run any organization, there are major challenges with budgets. It's critical. How are we going to run something? We've been cut, $14 million in the last 3 years. How do we protect the people? And as I care about people, and so it's extremely difficult for me. And of course, another, crisis that will happen, and we just happen to be in that run of tornadoes, not quite as much as more. First year I worked at Rose State, we had a major tornado, and I actually worked in this building and actually got to help start this theater. And guess where it hit? The theater. So we had no windows in this building. We had a graduation planned in this building, which did not take place. I was not president at that time. I was vice president. My secretary lost her house. She lost her car in the parking lot. We had all these students who aren't necessarily want to follow orders, wanted to go out and look at it. But there are a lot of challenges at colleges and critical. And I pray every day that we don't have a critical situation, because I do worry as a college president. But we have a plan, and we hopefully would follow that plan. And I just think the people that I work with for being such visionary, and we would do practice drills all the time for various kinds of problems, but I'm very thankful not to have been through the critical situation that you were.
Lindy?
I think of crises in the way you address them, and just as Jeanie was saying, are they challenges, are they crises? I look back and I think, what was I doing on 9/11? I was at the Aeronautical Center. I was the director. We were in a staff meeting, and my secretary came in and said, a plane's hit the World Trade Center. And my first thought was, how could the pilot be so far off course? And then, as we all know, one thing after another, and we realized that we were under attack. From the Aeronautical Center standpoint, because it is the largest facility in the field, but it's also the home to the Logistics Center, where the majority of assets for the National Airspace System, which would help control American Airlines. And we had to prepare as if we were under attack, because they didn't know how strategically the terrorists were targeting what was going to be next. But I remember thinking at the time, my job is to be the role model. My job is to be cool under pressure. My job is to bring the right people around, to listen. And we'd done that. I mean, we had a really collaborative team. And I think that's the secret in leadership in a crisis, is take one step at a time, bring the best people together, listen to each other, set a path. But you have an awful lot of people who need to be reassured, a lot of people that need to know things are going to be okay, and the only people who can tell them that is the leadership.
And Lindy, you did want me to make sure that I stated that you were not responsible for clearing the airspace that morning, right?
No, I was not.
Okay.
When you work for FAA, I think everybody gives you credit to say, I brought all the planes down. And what I think is interesting, just an aside, and now that I'm not with FAA, I probably can get away with saying this, but there were numerous people who took credit for making the decision to land all the planes, starting with the Secretary of Transportation, which that's usually the way it goes. But if you go back and you look at who really made those decisions, there's a lot of people went into that, and it was a huge decision.
Beverly, you were in the skies on 9/11. I'm not sure if that would be your crisis in a leadership moment, or maybe it would be.
You know, I don't really refer to my part of the job that day as a crisis for me. It was a crisis for, you know, all the people who were truly affected by 9/11. For me, it was a normal day. I left Paris. I was en route to Dallas. And what a lot of people don't know is my co-pilot was on his very first trip in the 777. And I was an instructor pilot, so it was an instructing flight. And he got to do a lot of things that most pilots don't ever get to do.
Is he still flying?
Yeah, okay. He is. Yes, he's a captain now. And not only did we have to divert, but we also jettisoned 7,000 pounds to get down to our max landing weight. And you know, most pilots will spend their whole airline career and never get to jettison fuel. So, you know, it was kind of a big deal. But what I say about that day is pilots always go to training. Yeah, we're always training. And we constantly practice, you know, abnormal procedures, emergency procedures, things that don't generally happen in our everyday flying life, hopefully. And that day, we did not have a checklist. We really just kind of operated minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day. Because, you know, once we landed in Gander, we were there for 5 days. And we really thought that we were just going to fuel up and continue on to destination. And it didn't work like that. But pilots operate with checklists, and we didn't have one that day.
And it sounds like, if I've heard correctly, I mean, the standard operating procedure that everyone says you get ready for, you practice, you put it on your shelf. There are situations where that's just never, I mean, every one of you has, it never is going to come off the shelf, because there is something that's unexpected that was never planned for. Which leads me into the point of leadership and other mentors. I mean, I know, Lindy, you mentioned, I think your dad was a big influencer on you. You kind of alluded to that. But tell me about your mentors. Tell me about who helped guide you. Tell me where you went back, and who did you touch point along the way, and making sure the value of the mentor.
It was interesting because I don't even think I appreciated what a mentor was, but even when I started in the government at a very low level, and I was getting ready to apply for a new job. And the man was older at the time. He probably was 40 in my mind. But he said, so are you ready to go in for the interview? And he said, so you're the best person for the job, aren't you? Well, that threw me. And I went, well, I don't know. And I'll never forget this. And he said, and he looked me right in the eye, and he said, if you don't think you're the best person for the job, don't even show up. Don't waste their time, and don't waste yours. He said, now don't get me wrong. There are things that may come up that you may not end up getting the job, but if you yourself don't think you're the best one for the job, you'll never get it, and you'll be wasting other people's time. And I think throughout my career, I had people who believed in me, probably more than I believed in myself. But it was not, it was tough love too. It was not, and I think that's a role of a good mentor or supporter, is it's not all about the good stuff. It's having the ability, and you care about someone, to look them in the eye and tell them what they need to hear, what's going to help them in the long run, give them support, but also give them feedback that's going to help them grow. And I really look back, and ironically, two of my very probably important mentors have since died. And I just look back and I think the impact they had on my life, and what it's caused me to do is I very much am engaged in mentoring because I know what it did for me.
Amy, I know we look to you. I look to you as a mentor.
Oh, wow.
And I know that I knew you were going to give that response. I knew you were going to be like, what? But I'd love to hear from you.
So my boss, my previous CEO, was my mentor. And I remember she was hired on after the bombing. And as she was helping, plan the future of our credit union, she was asking me questions. And, she said, if you had a magic wand, what would you do? And so I started spouting off all kinds of things, like, oh, I'd move this and this and do that and this program. And all of a sudden I kind of panicked and thought, I think I'm being a little too bold, I'm saying too much. I was like, oh, but I don't know anything about any of that. And she said, make no mistake, leadership lies a layer down. And it was something about the way she said that. And from that moment on, she would ask for my opinion, and it didn't matter if my opinion was one that was different than hers. She wanted to know the opinion. Like, to your point, she had faith in me before I had it in myself. And also would tell me the hard things. I remember one time her telling me, if you want to be CEO, the days are gone when you can become CEO without a college degree. And she challenged me to do some of the hard things that I knew I needed to do for my improvement and my growth. But she was also there cheering me along the way the whole time. And because of that, and because of the impact that had on my life, I am always mentoring at least two people, and also seeking to be mentored. And so I have lunches on a regular basis. Every month they're scheduled, and there's two individuals I'm mentoring in my industry but that do not work for my organization, and two people outside my organization that I go to lunch with for mentorship as well. I think it's very important.
Beverley?
My story is a little bit different. I did not have any mentors. And the reason for that is when I started flying in 1971, I didn't know a single female pilot. So I would have to say that my parents were my biggest mentors, most especially my father, because he paid for my flight lessons. I'm an only child, and I was raised to believe that I could do anything I wanted as long as I was willing to work hard to achieve my goals. I hunted in the Everglades of Florida on horseback at 10 years old with a rifle over my shoulder. I thought that all little girls did that. And then Monday morning, I'd be in a fashion show with my mother. So I did not know that I wasn't supposed to be an airline pilot. And so as a result of not having any mentors as far as aviation related, I have taken on that challenge myself. In 1978, I started an organization called the International Society of Women Airline Pilots. Today, we provide scholarship money for aspiring female airline pilots, and we are the largest single contributor. We've given out over $1.4 million, and we help young girls and guys all the time to pursue their dream.
And Dr. Webb, what about you?
Well, I'm certainly once again glad to follow Beverly.
Okay, sorry, I won't position you that way again. Okay, I'll make it duly noted.
I have to have a joke. Her and I had so much fun before we even started that they were having trouble controlling us and getting us in this room. So I think my mom was very much my mentor. My mom did not have any education at all, but she did not want me to have her life. But I will say, for the most part, that the mentors I had were male, because they were the ones in the positions. They were the ones, that would push me. And I can remember being in college, and my plan was not to be in higher ed. And I remember one of my professors, and Dr. Lee White, I get to day this I can remember, and he's passed away since, and he said, "Why don't you go get your doctorate? You've already got this degree in 3 years. You need to keep going. You can do this." And it was such a belief system. But I've been lucky in that not only have I had male mentors, I have, like you, I have a kind of group of females that I actually go to dinner with and lunch with. We try to do that kind of once a month. We try, quote. And that has helped me because, just so you know, as you move up in an organization, it's the loneliest place to be. You cannot talk to anyone. You cannot share with anyone. If you go to lunch with someone, you have favoritism. It is a very difficult thing. And then my last mentor, I have to say, for me, is my husband. Because my husband was a college president, and he understands I'm never going to be home. He gets that. He appreciates me. We have a daughter, and, she knows I'm never going to be home, so my family gets that. But I think he has helped me in always giving me that confidence and always saying, like today. Now, how many people get to start their day with this? In my car this morning when I went out to get in, my husband had, I don't eat healthy, sorry. My husband had Hostess cupcakes, and he had a little note that said, "I love you." Now, that's how I started my day. Now, that's a mentor, and it's somebody, he's always got my back. And at times it can make me cry because he's been there with me when I lost my mom. He's been there with me for everything. And so I always want to give him the credit, too, for supporting me.
How hard is it to mentor people? I know I have my mentor, and the tough love is difficult. It's really difficult to hear. I don't know if it's difficult to be given, but it sure is difficult to hear sometimes. But after a couple of days of breathing and working through some tears, you kind of go, okay, I needed that. I really needed that. Do you think that's more difficult coming from women versus men?
I think it's the way it's delivered. And I think it is very hard to give and get, but I think there's a strength in learning how to do that. You don't attack the individual. You attack what's happening, and you put it in the context that they want to know, and that if you don't, I think, then you're not being genuine to them. Then I think you're not being the type of mentor that people need. We all need to know this is what makes us tick, this is what our strengths, but if down the road you find out that there's a blind spot and no one has bothered to tell you, that's about as tough as it can. So I just think you give it with love. You give it with the idea that you're helping build someone to be the best they can be.
Anyone else have a thought on that?
Yeah, I think that when someone that you view as a mentor is giving you that feedback, to me a mentor is someone that they have your back. You trust them. You know they're telling you whatever they're telling you because they want you to win. And so sometimes maybe that it's easier in a mentor-mentee situation when you're not necessarily friends. You you aren't necessarily close where they have a vested interest in whatever the thing is that you're doing. If they can kind of sit from afar and give that, kind of unbiased opinion, feedback, direction, then it's not personal like it is if it's maybe a family member or somebody really close sometimes. That's what I find anyway, that sometimes it's easier for me to give feedback if it's somebody I'm not very, very close to because I'm more worried about hurting their feelings. Whereas if it's someone who I know they're really looking to me for that guidance, then I want to give it because I want them to win, and I want to tell it to them where it gets a little more difficult if there's the more feelings that are involved.
Okay, transitioning slightly to plotting your course. What would you tell your 20-year-old self? I'm knowing hindsight's 20/20, but what would you tell, and I'm not going to put you two together, so I'm going to switch it up. Beverly, start.
I would actually tell my 20-year-old self that I did it the right way. I was in college. I was a sophomore, I think, when I was 20, and I gave up boys, partying, and a sorority life because my days were spent driving out to the local airport in Fort Worth, Texas, taking my flying lessons, and it got me the dream job of my life. I was 24 years old when I got hired by American, and it's been fabulous ever since. I retired in 2008, but today I get to fly a private jet that is actually based out of Wiley Post Airport. And so here I am, this old woman still flying. So I wouldn't trade anything. I think my 20-year-old self did it just right.
Lindy.
I would tell myself that I'm okay. It sounds funny, but I think growing up and through college, you tend to focus on what you think you don't have rather than looking at God-given strengths and realizing you were put here to maximize those. I would tell myself, learn that earlier in life. I'd also tell myself to surround myself with people who don't think like I do and be ready to be challenged and realize how much you grow when you have different perspectives and backgrounds. And I'd also say and I've learned this over the years, the greatest strength is the ability to listen, and I've benefited from that.
Dr. Webb, I'm interested to hear what you would have told your 20-year-old self.
Well, at 20, thank goodness, and not 18. Glad you guys didn't ask me about 18. My 20-year-old self, I would say, I was driven. I was extremely driven. My dad was sick. My mom couldn't support me. I became so driven, that, I got that bachelor's in 3 years and then went to that master's in a year and then did the doctorate because of help. I would tell my 20-year-old self that it would be okay occasionally to have a little fun, because at 20, I did have fun. I'm not going to say that, but I was so driven that I have taken time, and I am still so driven that it's hard for me to tell myself, it's okay to take a vacation. It's okay to get sick like everybody else, but it's being driven, I think. And at this time in my life now, I would say, you know what? Probably everybody doesn't want to be exposed to what you have, so maybe it's okay to stay home. But my 20-year-old self was completely driven. I don't know if I would change anything because I don't think I would be fortunate or blessed to be where I am today if I had not been that driven.
Amy.
Oh, my word. So I was the complete opposite of that. My 20-year-old self was a complete mess. I'd just flunked out of college. My boyfriend, who I had a promise ring, which, hello, that's supposed to mean that's a promise to get another ring to get married one day, dumped me. I didn't have a degree. I didn't have a boyfriend, and that was before you could live with your parents till you were 40. So I thought that meant I needed to find another man to fix me. So if I could go back to 20 years old, I would have a mentor like this wonderful woman right here who would have told me, you fix yourself. You are your champion for yourself. You don't need a man. You don't need somebody else. Nobody else is going to make you happy. You make your own self happy. And that's what I would tell myself.
Wow. I think that's worth. So since we all have these somewhat different backgrounds, somewhat different philosophies about how we've approached life, what do you do regularly? And we've talked about mentoring, and I don't want to necessarily say that, but what do you do for self-care? What do you do for self-preservation? I mean, because I think that, well, I'm hoping you'll take more vacations. We all do. But Beverly, what do you do for self-care? Do you get in your airplane and fly off and just get in the clouds, or what do you do?
I wish it was my airplane,
Okay.
but it's not.
Well, for the sake of this panel, we'll say it is.
You know, before the musical Come From Away opened, which was in La Jolla in 2015, I had a very nice, peaceful life. I retired from American in 2008, and we have a home in Florida, so we were spending 3 months out of the year in Florida and, just living a nice, quiet life. Now that the musical has become a worldwide phenomenon, I am so busy, but in such a fabulous way, because I love promoting the show. I love talking about the show. I've seen the show 147 times. Yeah. It has 5 casts in 4 countries on 3 continents. And when it opened in La Jolla in 2015, they didn't even know if it would go to Broadway at that point. So it has gone crazy. And now I'm just so involved with that. And I have my flying job. So I don't have much downtime. In October, I was home 4 nights.
So you're saying you don't do any self-care?
I don't.
Okay.
No,
That's what you're saying.
No, I eat donuts. I eat Mexican food. I don't exercise. And I drink coffee. So don't do what I do.
Okay. Amy, self-care?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I am an absolute freak about this. I wake up at 3:30 a.m. and I spend the first hour journaling and reviewing my goals, and then the next hour is on my bicycle. And then I listen to podcasts or whatever growth series I'm on my way to work. And if I really need time to unwind, then I go on a really long bike ride, which is going to be anywhere from 50 to 70 miles.
Did you say 70?
70. Actually, yeah. So I ride my bike across the state of Oklahoma for 1 week every year. So I take 1 week, the first week in June, which is the hottest. Don't know why that. And me and a lot of other crazy friends, we ride our bicycle up from the Texas border to the Kansas border, which is about 500 miles, and it takes about 7 days. And that's how I really decompress and take care of me. So I love it.
And I love you for loving that.
Yeah. It's awesome.
Because I was like, oh, I could not do that.
I mean, there's something about when you have to power yourself to get to the next city, and all you can worry about is, did I turn on the right road, and do I have enough water, and do I have enough this? All those other things you worry about go away. Like, I don't know. It's a weird thing. It's great.
Sounds like survival.
It is. It's like survival. I don't know. Yeah.
Lindy, do you ride?
I have to follow this.
I know, sorry.
No, I don't ride. I do go to the gym. Self-preservation for me, I've found, is that ability to gain balance. I don't know if I always had that when I was working. I strive for it. But I'm very lucky, just like Roger. John is incredible. And we truly enjoy spending time together. So traveling and doing fun things. But I also realized when I retired in 2013 from FAA, that was not going to work as far as just stopping still. I'd had a very busy career, very gratifying. And what's been fun for me, and really preservation, is to shift gears. I started my own consulting firm. I became an aeronautics director, and it allowed me to look at things from a different way. And I said, what I have to offer is wisdom. When you have gray hair and you've been around for a long time, you have wisdom. And it is very interesting to be able to work with people and give back what you've learned over time, and a lot of times through the School of Hard Knocks.
Dr. Webb.
First, I do not ride my bike all over Oklahoma. I am willing to go with Beverly and fly. At any moment, I'm all about pleasure. I like to have the pleasure. But for me, it's a kind of a spiritual part of my life that I try to start with. And for those of you that, of course, already know me, I do work out every day on, I like to get on my treadmill. And for me, that's my time. No one is allowed in my area. Roger tries to get up sometimes. That's my time. All right, I have to tell him, go away.
See, that's the donut shop for me.
See, that's a donut shop.
Yeah.
She's doing donuts,
Yeah.
And I do like to get on my treadmill, but I eat donuts too. And I'm not going to say that I have a healthy life because anyone knows I started with Hostess cupcakes today. So I am not, but I do try to work out every day and have that time. I have zero time in my life. I work a ton of hours. So as all of these women, I am absolutely no different. I do have a plan, and the plan is one day that I will travel, because Roger and I love to travel. I love to play golf. Those of you that I love to go to Scotland, going to Hawaii and in spring break with my daughter. I love to travel, but I love to work too. So you people are not rid of me yet.
And I just got the signal that this time has flown by incredibly fast, and I didn't get through nearly all of my questions, so I apologize. But I wanted to wrap it up with one thing that if every one of you could speak to. For anyone in the audience who's wanting to break into leadership, or maybe they don't know it's called leadership, but they're being forced into that position, what advice would you give them? Good, bad, ugly, don't do, do? Amy, I'll start with you.
So I think if you're looking, the role that you're wanting to move into, the specific role, like wherever it is that you work, I would find somebody who has that position, whether it's inside your same organization or outside your organization. And I would go to that person and ask if they'll go to lunch with you. And when you go to lunch, have some questions. Be prepared, do your homework, and ask. Say, what would you tell me? I want a job like yours one day. What would you tell me? And just be a sponge. Start asking questions. Start looking for those people that have the job that you want and start asking them. And that's how you organically end up getting a mentor, is by just building those relationships and asking those questions.
Beverly.
Well, my situation is a little bit different because, I didn't work in a corporate office or anything like that. My office was actually a very confined metal tube. And I always try to advise people, especially when they transition from being a co-pilot to a captain, where you're actually in charge of the whole airplane. You have to obviously be very good at your job, especially if you're female, because chances are you're working mostly with men. The airlines still only have 5% women pilots, so our percentage is not good. And you have to maintain respect. You can never let your guard down. You don't have to sit in the cockpit and tell dirty jokes. I never felt like I had to try to be one of the guys. I always said that I was a girl first. I just happened to be a girl pilot. And when you become a captain, I think it's very important to be the boss without being bossy. And that's what I tried to live by.
Lindy.
Remember, when you're aspiring to be a leader, that you have the opportunity right now. It doesn't mean that you're in a leadership position. Every day you have the opportunity to be a leader. And think about what that looks like, and think about playing to your strengths. I said, you've heard that the worst thing you can do is try to be someone that you're not. And you need to be genuine. But the role of a leader is incredible. And you can do it at any level, as I mentioned. But think about, it's not about you. It becomes, although you've probably been outstanding in your role to get there, once you become a leader, it's about that incredible ability to unite, to direct, to support. I always think of it more like a symphony conductor. The conductor does not go down and play the individual instruments. They stand up on the dais and they're able to create beautiful music. And I just think leadership is one of the most exciting things you can be involved in.
Dr. Webb, will you wrap us up?
I think she said that beautifully. I would say, I think anyone can be a leader. I think that you have to have that confidence. It's like, I think you said early in, you have to know and you have to own it. You have to know that you can do it. But you've also got to let people, as you talked about, know. As I know as president, I mean, if somebody aspires to a greater job, you have to communicate that. So we can give you those opportunities, and you have to take the time, you have to work the hours. I mean, people don't realize that leadership, you're really never off. That's just the thing of it. But we will listen. I want everyone to succeed. I want people better. I try to always hire people better than me, because that's how you're going to get to the vision or to be the very best. And I'm all about being the very best that you can. But tell someone, let us help you. Because leadership, as I think you said it best, it's at every single area. Doesn't matter that what your title is. And people forget that. And if you read the John Maxwell books, I think you would learn a lot about that.
Will you please join me in thanking our panelists today, since we ran out of time? Thank you, ladies, so much. And I would obviously be very remiss if we didn't have a little bit from Come From Away. So if you turn your attention to the screen, you're going to see a little bit of what's coming in February.
Who've left, you're never truly gone. A candle's in the window and the candle's always on. To the coves and the caves and the people from the plains.
1986, the first female American captain in history. Suddenly I'm in the cockpit. Suddenly I've got my wings. Suddenly all of those pilots protesting me, well, they can get their own drinks.
Farewell to all you pretty ladies waving from the dock. Heave away, me jollies, heave away. And if we do return to you, we'll make your cradles rock. Heave away, me jolly boys, we're all bound away.
Farewell to Newfoundland, and boys, you're leaving us alone. Heave away, me jollies, heave away. And if you find another, we got lovers of our own.
Heave away, me jolly boys, we're all bound away.
And that concludes our event today. Thank you so much for joining us here at Rose State, and we hope you have a wonderful day. And we will